My mother-in-law crossed my name out like I was never part of the family. My daughter watched, my injured husband couldn't speak, and everyone thought I would stay quiet. But 1 week later, I walked into their business meeting with proof they could not erase. My name is Kerris Mayfield, and I was 34 years old when my mother-in-law tried to remove me from my own family with a red pen. She did not shout. She did not slam a door. She did something worse. She placed a printed family access list on the table at a supper club in Duluth, Minnesota, and my name had been crossed out in red ink. My daughter's name was still there. My husband's name was still there. Mine had a straight red line through it, like I was a spelling mistake. Then Orla Mayfield looked at me across the table and said, "Until Sutter can speak for himself, you are not part of Mayfield family decisions." My 8-year-old daughter, Lenny, stared at that paper with her small hands in her lap and whispered, "Mom, do I have to go without you?" I did not answer right away. If I opened my mouth too fast, I knew I would say something my child could never unhear. So I folded the list, put it in my purse, stood up, and smiled like my heart was not shaking inside my chest. What Orla did not know was that 1 week later I would walk into her family business meeting with proof she could not explain, a document she should never have touched, a ledger her son thought was hidden, and the voice of the man they thought could not speak for himself. Welcome back to Pure Drama Stories, where quiet people bring loud truth, and where proof speaks when families refuse to listen. If you have ever been pushed out of a room you helped hold together, this story is for you. I was not born into the Mayfield family. That was the sentence Orla loved the most, even when she didn't say it out loud. I married into it 9 years earlier in a small courthouse ceremony after a snowstorm, because Sutter and I were tired of waiting for everyone else's approval. Sutter Mayfield was the kind of man who wore flannel even to nice restaurants, kept emergency granola bars in his truck, and said, "We'll figure it out," with such confidence that you believed him before you knew the plan. He was 37, tall, broad-shouldered, patient in a way I never learned to be. He worked for Mayfield Home Supply, the building and hardware company his grandfather had started near the harbor. His mother, Orla, treated that business like a second family Bible. She believed every nail, every invoice, every old customer account carried the Mayfield name like a crown. I worked as an escrow coordinator at North Shore Title, which meant my life was made of signatures, dates, notary stamps, legal descriptions, closing packets, and people pretending they understood what they were signing. I noticed small details for a living. A date out of order, a missing witness line. A name typed one way on page 2 and another way on page 7. Before everything happened, that skill paid our bills and annoyed my husband when I corrected forms at the kitchen table. After everything happened, it saved my place in my daughter's life. Sutter used to tease me and say, "Kerris, you can smell a bad signature from across Lake Superior." I would roll my eyes, but he was right. Paper talked to me. Most people only saw ink. I saw timing, pressure, motive, and fear. Our daughter Lenny was 8 years old, all elbows, big gray eyes, and questions that arrived before breakfast. She loved drawing bridges, especially the aerial lift bridge, because Sutter once told her it was a giant that opened its mouth to let ships pass. Every Sunday afternoon, if the weather was not terrible, we drove down to Canal Park, bought hot chocolate even in summer, and watched the lake move like it had secrets under its skin. That was our family rhythm. Work, school, dinner, homework, lake, repeat. It was not perfect, but it was ours. Then, in late January, black ice turned our life into a room full of machines. Sutter's accident happened on a Monday morning just before sunrise on a service road near the warehouse. He was driving the company pickup after checking an overnight heating issue at Mayfield Home Supply. A delivery truck had slid sideways near the turn. Sutter tried to avoid it, lost control, and hit a concrete barrier hard enough to crush the front end of the truck. The police report said weather was a primary factor. The doctors said traumatic brain injury, swelling, fractured ribs, and aphasia. Aphasia was the word that changed our marriage without ending it. Sutter understood more than he could say. Some days he could nod. Some days he could point. Some days he got one word out after 30 seconds of effort, and the word came rough, like it had climbed over broken glass to reach the air. The first time he looked at me in the hospital, I knew he was still there. I do not mean that in a romantic movie way. I mean, his eyes tracked me when I walked into the room. His hand moved when Lenny cried beside the bed. When Orla spoke over me, his fingers tightened around the blanket. His body was injured, but my husband was not gone. I held on to that because some people in his family started speaking about him like he was already a photograph. Orla especially. She would stand at the foot of his hospital bed in pearl earrings and a long wool coat, looking polished enough to attend a funeral every day, and she would tell the nurses, my son would want his family in charge. I would say, I am his wife. She would answer with a soft smile, of course, dear, no one is denying that. But she was denying it. She denied it in tiny ways first. She told the rehab staff that I was exhausted and that she could take over communication. She told Sutter's cousin that I was too emotional to discuss business. She told Lenny, right in front of me, Grandma's house will always be your real Mayfield home. She said real like I was a temporary address. In the first month after the accident, I made excuses for her. Orla was scared. Orla loved control because fear made her cruel. Orla had built her identity around being the Mayfield mother, the Mayfield widow, the woman who kept the family business running after her husband died. I told myself grief had sharp edges. I told myself not every cut was intentional. I told myself a lot of things because I was sleeping 4 hours a night, working closing files during the day, visiting Sutter at rehab in the evening, helping Lenny with homework at night, and waking up from dreams where my husband could speak again. Sutter's brother, Gannon, was the one who worried me more quietly. He was 39, charming in a tired, expensive way, always wearing a puffer vest with the company logo and boots that had never seen a job site. Gannon handled parts of the business finances, vendor payments, and warehouse accounts. He always had a reason to leave when I entered a room. Before the accident, Sutter had been tense about him. I had caught my husband twice at the kitchen table after midnight with invoices spread out in front of him, rubbing his forehead like the numbers were speaking a language he did not like. When I asked, he said, "Something at the shop isn't lining up." Then he kissed my shoulder and told me not to worry until he had facts. That was Sutter. He did not throw accusations. He built a bridge first, then decided whether to cross it. Orla's daughter, Selby Mayfield Rowntree, was different. Selby did not lead attacks. She decorated them. She had the smile of a person who could insult you and make it sound like concern. "Kerris, you look thin," she would say. "Are you sure you're eating? Lenny needs a steady mother right now." Or, "I can take Lenny shopping for winter boots. You probably don't know what the Mayfield kids usually wear." The Mayfield kids. Like my daughter had been born into a catalog I had failed to read. Selby had 2 teenagers and a husband who traveled for medical equipment sales. She missed the version of family where everyone came back to Orla's table and played their assigned roles. I had never played mine correctly. I asked questions. I said no. I did not treat the Mayfield name like weather. The supper club incident happened 6 weeks after Sutter moved from the hospital to a neuro rehab center outside Duluth. Orla called it a family support dinner. She said, "We need to discuss how we move forward while Sutter heals." I asked if Perrin Calder, the business attorney Sutter trusted, would be there. Orla laughed gently, like I had asked whether we needed a judge to cut a birthday cake. "This is family, Kerris. Don't make it cold." That should have been enough warning, but Lenny heard that her grandmother was ordering Swedish meatballs and chocolate pie, and she wanted to go. She wanted normal. I wanted to give my child one evening where adults did not whisper in corners and then stop when she walked in. The supper club sat near the water with dark wood walls, old lake maps, and yellow lights that made everyone look softer than they were. When Lenny and I arrived, Orla was already seated at the head of a long table in the private room. Gannon sat to her right. Selby sat to her left. 2 cousins, an aunt, and Maëlle Pierce were there too. Maëlle had gone to high school with Sutter. She was kind enough, at least on the surface, but Orla had started mentioning her too often. Maëlle understands Sutter's younger years. Mael remembers what he wanted before life got complicated. Before life got complicated meant before me. Mael looked uncomfortable when I walked in. That told me she knew enough to be ashamed, but not enough to leave. Dinner moved like a performance. Everyone asked about Sutter, but looked at Orla for the answers. Gannon talked about supplier delays. Selby talked about how Lenny needed consistent Mayfield traditions. I talked only when I had to. Lenny colored on the kids' menu with a blue crayon. After dessert, Orla opened a cream folder and passed out copies of a printed sheet titled Interim Family Access and Decision List. My eyes went straight to the middle of the page. Sutter Mayfield, recovering family member. Lenny Mayfield, minor Mayfield child. Orla Mayfield, primary family elder. Gannon. Mayfield, business liaison. Selby Rowntree, family support. My name appeared near the bottom under other contacts, crossed out in red ink. Beside it, someone had written, non-family attendance by invitation only. For a few seconds, the room had no sound. Or maybe it had sound and my body refused to receive it. I looked at the line through my name. It was clean and straight, drawn with a ruler or a very steady hand. Orla folded her hands on the table. "This is not personal," she said, which is what people say when they are about to do something deeply personal and want credit for politeness. Until Sutter can speak for himself, we need clear family boundaries. I felt Lenny shift beside me. Her eyes were on the page. She could read well enough to understand that her mother had been moved to the wrong side of a line. "Mom," she whispered, "do I have to go without you?" That whisper reached me harder than Orla's whole speech. I saw Gannon look away. Selby pressed her lips together. Mael stared at her water glass. Orla waited, expecting me to cry, argue, defend myself, maybe prove her point. I folded the list once, then again, and slid it into my purse. "Thank you for putting this in writing," I said. Orla blinked. That was not the reaction she had prepared for. "Kerris," she began. I stood and helped Lenny into her coat. "We're going home." Lenny clung to my hand all the way through the restaurant. In the parking lot, the wind off Lake Superior slapped my face so hard my eyes watered. I told myself it was the cold. In the car, Lenny asked again, "Am I still Mayfield if you're not?" I pulled the car door closed and turned toward her. "You are Lenny. You are mine. You are your dad's. Nobody's paper can change that." She nodded, but not like she believed me. More like she wanted to. That night, after I put her to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and took out the list. I photographed it front and back. I wrote down every person in the room, every sentence I remembered, the time we arrived, the time we left, and the exact way Orla said, "Until Sutter can speak for himself." My hands were not shaking anymore. That was always the sign. When I was hurt, I shook. When I was done, I got organized. I opened a folder on my laptop and named it Mayfield Boundary Record. It was not a revenge folder. Not yet. It was a place to put the truth before someone tried to rearrange it. The next morning, Tuesday, Lenny's school called at 10:18. I remember because I was reviewing a closing packet for a duplex sale and noticed the seller had missed initials on page 4. The school secretary said Selby Rowntree had come in with a form asking to be added as an emergency contact. Selby said the family was restructuring support because of Sutter's medical condition. My mouth went dry, but my voice stayed steady. "Do not add anyone without my written approval," I said. "I am Lenny's mother. No one else has authorization." The secretary apologized twice. I asked her to email confirmation that the request had been denied. Then I called Selby. She answered brightly. "I was just trying to help." I said, "You tried to add yourself to my daughter's school file without asking me." Her tone cooled. "Kerris, this is exactly why Orla is concerned. You treat every offer like an attack." I looked at the red-lined list on my desk. When help comes with paperwork behind my back, it is not help. She hung up first. I added the school incident to my record. On Wednesday, the rehab center called. This time it was a nurse manager named Tavia, who had always been kind to me. Her voice carried the careful tone professionals use when they are trying not to step into a family war. Kerris, I wanted to let you know Mrs. Orla Mayfield asked whether we could adjust Sutter's visitor priority list. She said visits with you sometimes increase his agitation. I closed my eyes. I could see exactly how Orla had said it. Softly. Sadly. As if she was protecting him from the wife who sat beside his bed every evening and rubbed lotion into his cracked knuckles. Did Sutter appear agitated during my visits? I asked. Tavia paused. No. Actually, he seems calmer when you're here. I drove to the rehab center during my lunch break with copies of Sutter's medical power of attorney, his HIPAA authorization, and the durable power of attorney he had signed 2 years earlier after a friend of ours had a stroke. Sutter had joked then that we were too young for such serious papers. I had said serious papers were best signed before serious days arrived. I hated being right. At the rehab desk, I handed Tavia the documents. I am his legal medical decision maker, I said. Please note the file that no visitor changes, information releases, or family communications are to be accepted from anyone else without my written consent. Tavia nodded. We can do that. I went to Sutter's room after. He was sitting near the window with a therapy blanket over his lap, looking out at a gray sky. His hair had grown uneven around his ears. He turned when he heard my steps. His face softened. That softening nearly broke me every time. I sat beside him and told him about Lenny's science project, about the school call, about the supper club list. When I said Orla had crossed out my name, his left hand curled into a fist on the blanket. He tried to speak. His mouth shaped the first sound, but the word would not come. I touched his wrist. Don't force it. He shut his eyes in frustration. Then he tapped my hand twice. Our old signal. 2 taps meant I'm here. I leaned forward until my forehead touched his shoulder. I know, I whispered, but I need you to keep fighting your way back. On Thursday, the envelope came. It was not certified. It was slid under my front door sometime between dinner and bedtime, which meant someone had walked up my porch while Lenny and I were inside. I found it when I went to check the lock. There was no return address. Inside was a copy of a document titled Temporary Family Authority Agreement. My name appeared nowhere on the first page. It stated that Sutter Mayfield, due to his temporary medical incapacity, wished for Orla Mayfield and Gannon Mayfield to manage all family-related, business-related, and minor child tradition decisions until his recovery. Minor child tradition decisions. I almost laughed because the phrase was so strange and so dangerous at the same time. It sounded harmless, like holiday cookies and lake trips. But people hide knives inside soft language all the time. Then I saw Sutter's signature at the bottom. My heart stopped for 1 beat, then restarted colder. The document was dated February 3rd. February 3rd was 3 days after the accident. On February 3rd, Sutter was in the ICU. He had a breathing tube until noon. His right hand was swollen from IV lines. He could not hold a pen. I knew that because I had been there, sleeping in a chair beside his bed with Lenny's drawing folded in my coat pocket. Under the signature was a notary stamp. I stared at it for a long time. The stamp said Darlene Voss, Notary Public, State of Minnesota. My escrow brain woke up fully. The commission expiration date looked wrong. The border of the stamp was blurry, like it had been copied from an older document. The signature line looked too smooth. Sutter's real signature had a small break before the M in Mayfield because he lifted the pen without realizing it. This one did not. I called Nadine's lawyer before I called anyone else. Nadine was a title examiner at my office, 38, blunt, brilliant, and able to find a missing easement faster than most people found their car keys. She came over after work wearing a green parka and carrying takeout soup. I showed her the document. She read it once, then again. "This is garbage," she said. "Legal garbage or moral garbage?" I asked. "Both. But the stamp is what smells worst." She opened her laptop and searched the Minnesota Notary database. Darlene Voss's commission had expired 8 months earlier. Nadine turned the screen toward me. Expired. Also, look at the county. This stamp says St. Louis County, but her last active commission listed a different address near Brainerd. I sat back slowly. So, someone copied an old stamp. Nadine nodded. Or used a bad scan. Either way, this document should not exist. She looked at me carefully. Kerris, who benefits if people believe Sutter signed this? I did not answer. We both knew. After Nadine left, I stood in the doorway of Sutter's home office for almost 5 minutes before I went in. The office still smelled like him. Cedar soap and printer paper and the peppermint gum he chewed when he was thinking. The desk had been untouched since the accident, except for bills I had sorted. On the wall, Lenny had taped a drawing of him as a superhero holding a hammer. I started with the file drawers, tax returns, insurance papers, vendor notes, old warranties. Nothing. Then I checked the closet where Sutter kept sample boards, extra company jackets, and outdated inventory devices. On the top shelf was a cracked black tablet with a Mayfield home supply sticker on the back. The screen lit up when I plugged it in, weak but alive. It asked for a passcode. I tried Sutter's birthday. Wrong, our anniversary. Wrong, then Lenny's birthday. The tablet opened. There are sounds grief stores in your body. Sutter laughing from the garage. Sutter calling keys because he lost them again. Sutter singing off-key while making pancakes. I was not prepared to hear his normal voice come from that cracked tablet at 11:42 on a Thursday night. There was a folder labeled Inventory Notes. Inside were voice memos. Most were boring. North dock screws low. Call vendor about damaged trim. Check Gannon's order numbers. Then one file, dated January 26th, 4 days before the accident, had a title that made my stomach drop. If I'm wrong, delete this. I pressed play. Sutter's voice filled the kitchen, tired and low. Kerris, if you find this, don't panic. I'm probably being dramatic. But if something happens, or if I can't explain this right away, check the blue ledger file in the garage cabinet behind the paint samples. Harbor Ridge Maintenance is not what it looks like. Gannon's been moving money, or someone is moving it through his approvals. I haven't told Mom because she'll protect him first and ask questions later. I trust you. If I can't speak, you speak for me. Don't let them push you out. I pressed pause because my body forgot how to breathe. Then I played the last part again. If I can't speak, you speak for me. His voice was not a love letter. It was not soft. It was serious, practical, scared, in a way Sutter rarely allowed himself to be. I sat on the kitchen floor with the tablet in my lap and cried for the man in that recording, the man trying to build a bridge out of facts before the ice took him off the road. Then I got up. Grief could have the floor for 10 minutes. After that, I needed the garage. The blue ledger file was exactly where he said it would be, in the garage cabinet behind 2 paint sample books and a box of old cabinet handles. It was a physical folder because Sutter trusted paper when numbers mattered. Inside were printed invoices, vendor payment lists, handwritten notes, and bank transfer copies. Harbor Ridge Maintenance had received payments from Mayfield. Home supply for snow removal, equipment repair, warehouse cleaning, and emergency maintenance. The amounts were not huge at first. $1,200, $2,800, then larger, $6,000, $9,000. One invoice for $14,000 marked urgent roof bracing after storm damage. I knew enough about the warehouse to know there had been no storm damage that month. Sutter had circled the vendor address. It was a mailbox rental near Superior, Wisconsin. Another page connected Harbor Ridge to an LLC created by a man who shared Gannon's middle name and an address Gannon had used years earlier. It was not a complete criminal case, but it was enough to show why Gannon wanted me away from Sutter's files, Sutter's business, and Sutter's authority. By Friday morning, I was sitting in the office of Perrin Calder, the attorney Sutter had once called, the only lawyer in Duluth who smiles like he knows where the bodies are buried but still sends thank you notes. Perrin was 52, calm, careful, with silver hair and a voice that made panic feel inefficient. His office overlooked a narrow street with dirty snow piled along the curb. I put everything on his conference table: the red line family access list, the school email, the rehab paperwork, the temporary family authority agreement, the notary database printout, the blue ledger, the tablet with Sutter's voice memo. Perrin listened without interrupting. That is how I knew he was good. Bad lawyers rush to sound smart. Good ones let the facts finish entering the room. When I was done, Perrin removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Kerris," he said, "there are several issues here. Your spousal authority is clear. The medical power of attorney is clear. The durable power of attorney is clear. This so-called family authority agreement is not only legally weak, it may be fraudulent if that signature or notary stamp was copied or misused." He tapped the blue ledger. "The business records raise a separate concern: possible self-dealing, conversion, breach of fiduciary duty, maybe more depending on what the accountant finds." I stared at the table. I don't want to burn the whole family down. Perrin's expression did not change. "Then we won't start with fire. We start with light." He drafted a notice that same day. It demanded that Orla, Gannon, and Selby stop interfering with Lenny's school records, stop contacting Sutter's rehab team except through me, withdraw the false authority agreement, preserve all business records, and attend a formal meeting at Mayfield Home Supply the following Monday with the company accountant present. It also stated that any further use of the questionable document could result in legal action. Before the notice landed, Orla made one more move. Saturday afternoon, I walked into Sutter's rehab room and found Maëlle Pierce sitting in my chair. My chair. The one by the window where I sat every evening. She held a paper cup of coffee with both hands and looked like she wanted the floor to open. Orla stood near the bed, smiling too brightly. "Kerris, Maëlle was kind enough to visit. She and Sutter go way back. Sometimes familiar faces from before can help." From before. The words landed exactly where she aimed them. Before me, before our marriage, before Lenny, before the legal papers that named me, before the red line that failed to erase me. Sutter's eyes were fixed on the ceiling, his jaw tight. I walked to the bed. "Sutter?" I said softly. His gaze shifted to me at once. His hand moved across the blanket, slow and uneven, searching. I took it. He tapped twice against my palm. Then, with effort that made his face tighten, he pushed out one word. "Stay." Maëlle stood up immediately. Her face had gone red. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know." Orla's smile froze. I did not look at her. I looked only at my husband. "I'm here," I said. "I'm staying. If someone has ever tried to make you look unstable while they were hiding the truth, keep watching." Because Kerris was about to find the one mistake they forgot to erase, and 1 week after they crossed out her name, she was going to walk into the room with proof that the real outsider was not her. Certified delivery was confirmed Monday morning at 8:12. Perrin's office called me while I was packing Lenny's lunch. Orla signed first at her house. Gannon signed at the warehouse. Selby signed at her home. By 8:40, my phone started ringing. Orla, I let it go. Gannon, I let it go. Orla again. I answered the third call because sometimes silence is stronger after the other person hears you are not afraid. "What have you done?" Orla asked. Her voice shook, but not with sadness, with offense. I asked my attorney to put the truth in writing. "You sent a legal threat to your own family." I zipped Lenny's lunch bag. "No, I sent a legal boundary to people who crossed one." Orla inhaled sharply. "You have no idea what Sutter would want." I looked toward the hallway where the cracked tablet sat inside my work bag. "Actually, Orla, I have a better idea than you think." She went quiet. Then she said, "We'll be at the meeting." "Good," I said. "Bring the original document you claim Sutter signed." She hung up. I found out later from Selby what happened at the warehouse that morning. Gannon read Perrin's notice in his office and locked his door. The warehouse manager heard him making calls, fast and low. Orla arrived 20 minutes later, holding her copy of the letter like it was dirty. She demanded that Gannon explain why the notice mentioned Harbor Ridge maintenance. Gannon said Kerris was confused. Orla asked why the notice mentioned a forged notary stamp. Gannon said lawyers use scary words. Orla asked why Sutter would record a memo about business payments. That was when Gannon stopped talking. Selby told me Orla's face changed then. Not softened. Not sorry. Just changed. For the first time, she understood there was a room behind the room, and Gannon had been standing in it with the lights off. The meeting was set for Monday at 4 p.m. in the Mayfield Home Supply Conference Room. I worked half a day because normal tasks kept me from becoming only rage. I reviewed a closing statement, corrected a parcel number, answered emails, and ate half a turkey sandwich I did not taste. At 2:30, I drove to the rehab center. Sutter was in speech therapy. His therapist, Jonah, had him working with a tablet communication board. I told Sutter about the meeting. His eyes followed every word. "I can have Perrin handle it without me," I said. He shook his head once. Then he pointed to the tablet. Jonah helped him type slowly. The words appeared one at a time. Video call. I stared at him. "Are you sure?" Sutter's hand trembled as he moved it again. He typed, "Need say." My throat closed. I nodded. "Okay, but only if it doesn't exhaust you." He gave me the look he used to give me when I suggested he rest during a home repair project. Stubborn was still in there. Thank God. At 3:47, I parked outside Mayfield Home Supply. The building was old brick with a faded green sign and loading docks facing the back lot. Snowmelt ran in dirty lines along the pavement. The air smelled like lumber, salt, and cold metal. I had been inside that building hundreds of times as Sutter's wife. I had brought him forgotten lunches, picked up paint, attended holiday parties, watched Lenny run between stacks of mulch bags while Sutter pretended not to let her climb on pallets. But that day, I was not walking in as a guest. I was walking in as the person my husband had chosen, on paper, in life, and in his own recorded voice. In my bag were the redlined list, legal authority documents, the questionable agreement, the notary proof, the blue ledger, printed Harbor Ridge invoices, and the tablet. It weighed maybe 5 pounds. It felt like carrying a door back to its frame. Param met me near the entrance. He wore a dark overcoat and held a slim folder. "How are you?" he asked. "Angry," I said. "Good," he replied. "Just don't let it drive." We walked through the showroom past aisles of tools, paint cans, plumbing parts, and winter shovels. Employees looked away politely, which meant everyone knew something was happening. The conference room sat behind the office area, with a long table, a whiteboard, and framed photos of the business from different decades. Orla was already there at the head of the table, because of course she was. Gannon sat beside her, bouncing one knee. Selby sat across from him, pale and quiet. The company accountant, Rusk Bellamy, sat near the end with a laptop open and a face that said he had not slept well. Maëlle was not there. Good. This was not her fight. Orla spoke before I sat. "This has gone far enough." I remained standing. Perrin sat, but I did not. There are moments when sitting makes you look like you are waiting for permission. I was done waiting. I placed the red-lined family access list on the table first. "1 week ago, you handed me this in front of my daughter." Orla's jaw tightened. That was a family guideline. "No," I said. "It was an attempt to remove me from decisions about my husband and my child." Gannon leaned back. "You're being dramatic." I looked at him for the first time. Gannon, confusion does not create fake vendor payments. Drama does not copy an expired notary stamp. And emotion does not date a document for a day when Sutter was in the ICU with a breathing tube. The room went still. Perrin slid copies of Sutter's medical power of attorney and durable power of attorney across the table. "For the record," he said, "Kerris Mayfield is Sutter Mayfield's legal spouse, medical proxy, and attorney in fact under the durable power of attorney, signed 2 years prior to his accident. No family list can override that." Orla did not touch the papers. I am his mother. Yes, Perrin said. You are, but you are not his legal decision-maker. The sentence landed like a gavel, even though no judge was there. Orla's eyes flashed. Law is not family. I said, no, but law becomes necessary when family forgets where the line is. I placed the temporary family authority agreement beside the legal documents. Who prepared this? Nobody answered. I looked at Gannon. Who prepared it? He shrugged. Mom had some notes. We were trying to keep things organized. This document claims Sutter signed authority over to you and Orla on February 3rd. I placed a hospital record beside it. On February 3rd, Sutter was in the ICU. He could not sign his name, he could not consent to this, and the notary stamp belongs to a notary whose commission expired 8 months before this document was dated. Rusk, the accountant, looked up sharply. Selby whispered, Gannon. Gannon's face hardened. You don't know what you're talking about. I opened the tablet and played Sutter's voice memo. For a moment, my husband's old voice filled the conference room, stronger than any of us expected. Kerris, if you find this, don't panic. I'm probably being dramatic. But if something happens, or if I can't explain this right away, check the blue ledger file in the garage cabinet behind the paint samples. Harbor Ridge maintenance is not what it looks like. Gannon's been moving money, or someone is moving it through his approvals. I haven't told Mom because she'll protect him first and ask questions later. I trust you. If I can't speak, you speak for me. Don't let them push you out. No one moved. Even the building seemed to hold still around us. Orla's face had gone white in a way makeup could not cover. Selby put one hand over her mouth. Rusk stared at Gannon. Gannon looked at the tablet like he wanted to break it, but knew that would only prove he was afraid. I opened the blue ledger and spread the invoices in a neat line down the table. Harbor Ridge Maintenance received over $82,000 in payments across 14 months. The address is a mailbox rental. Several invoices match approvals connected to Gannon's login. One LLC filing connects to an address Gannon used before his divorce. Gannon stood so fast his chair hit the wall behind him. This is insane. Perrin's voice stayed calm. Sit down, Mr. Mayfield. Gannon pointed at me. She's trying to take the business. I almost smiled. Not because anything was funny, but because desperate people often accuse you of wanting the thing they stole. I don't want the business, I said. I want you to stop using it as a reason to erase me. Russ cleared his throat. Gannon, I asked you twice last quarter about Harbor Ridge backup documents. Gannon turned on him. Stay out of this. Russ closed his laptop halfway. I don't think I can. Orla finally spoke, and her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. Gannon, did you know Sutter was looking into this before the accident? Gannon's eyes flicked toward the door. Mom, don't start. Did you know? She asked again. He did not answer. He did not have to. Orla's hand lowered slowly to the table, fingers spreading over the wood like she needed something solid to keep herself upright. You told me Kerris was trying to control him. Gannon looked away. She was getting in the way. Of what? Selby asked. Her voice cracked. Of your theft? Gannon said, I kept this place running. Rusk said quietly, the records do not show that. Gannon laughed once, ugly and short. After Dad died, Mom leaned on me. Sutter questioned everything, and then Kerris started acting like she had a say. I felt something cold settle in me. There it was, not family, not concern, not tradition, control. Orla looked at me then, really looked at me, maybe for the first time since Sutter's accident, not as an outsider, not as a woman who married in, not as a problem to manage, as the person holding the truth she should have asked for before crossing out my name. I thought I was protecting my son, she said. I wanted to be gentle. I did. But gentleness without truth is just another kind of lie. You did not protect your son by removing his wife, I said. You protected the man who was stealing from him. Orla flinched. Selby started crying silently, her shoulders shaking. Gannon muttered something under his breath and sat down again, smaller now, the anger leaking out of him as the evidence took up more space than his voice. Then Perrin's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and nodded to me. It was time for the video call. He connected the laptop to the conference room monitor. After a few seconds, Sutter appeared on the screen in his rehab chair, Jonah beside him. His face was tired, but his eyes were clear. Orla made a sound that was almost a sob. Sutter. He looked at her, then at Gannon, then at me. Jonah held up the communication tablet. Sutter typed slowly. We waited. Nobody rushed him. Nobody dared. The words appeared on the screen. Kerris speaks for me. Orla covered her mouth. Gannon looked down. Sutter typed again. Slower this time. My wife. My choice. Then he lifted his hand and tapped twice against the armrest. I pressed my fingers to my palm, under the table, feeling those 2 taps like they had crossed the room and landed in my skin. She didn't go there to beg for her place. She went there with the paper they forged, the record they ignored, and the voice they thought was silent. And when that voice finally entered the room, nobody could pretend the red line meant anything anymore. After the video call ended, I set my terms. My voice did not shake. No one contacts Lenny's school except me. No one contacts Sutter's rehab team except through me unless Sutter's care team approves it and I am informed the temporary family authority agreement is withdrawn today in writing. Gannon is removed from financial access pending a full audit. All Harbor Ridge records are preserved. No one brings Mayel or anyone else into Sutter's room as a replacement emotional witness. And if there is any family event where my daughter is invited and I am crossed out, Lenny will not attend. Orla closed her eyes. You would keep her from us? No, I said. You did that when you made love conditional on removing her mother. Selby wiped her face. Kerris, I'm sorry. It was not dramatic. It was not enough to fix everything, but it was the first honest sentence she had spoken in a week. I nodded once. Thank you. Gannon refused to sign anything that day. Perrin said that was his right. Then he said the audit would proceed with or without his comfort. Rusk agreed to provide records directly to Perrin and an outside forensic accountant. Orla signed a written withdrawal of the authority agreement before leaving the room. Her hand trembled when she wrote her name. I watched the ink move across the page. Not because I enjoyed her humiliation. I did not. I watched because 1 week earlier she had used red ink to remove me. Now black ink was returning the truth to its proper place. When the meeting ended, I walked out through the showroom alone. Employees pretended to stock shelves. Someone dropped a box of screws, and the sound scattered across the aisle like tiny bells. Outside, the late afternoon sky was pale and hard over the harbor. I sat in my car for a full minute before starting it. Not crying, not shaking, just breathing. Then I drove to the rehab center. Sutter was asleep when I arrived, worn out from the call. I sat beside him and took his hand. His fingers moved after a minute. 2 taps. I smiled through tears I did not try to stop. We did it, I whispered. His eyes opened halfway, his mouth worked. The word came out rough, almost broken but clear enough. Home. I bent my head over his hand. Yes, I said. We're going to get there. The aftermath did not arrive like a movie ending. It came in paperwork, awkward calls, and quiet changes. Gannon stepped away from business accounts after the outside accountant found more irregular payments than even Sutter had documented. The matter became legal, then financial, then private, in the way family businesses often try to keep shame private. I did not need to know every detail to know this. He was no longer in charge of money that belonged to other people. Perrin handled the audit. Rusk cooperated. Orla stopped calling the rehab center. Selby emailed the school a written apology for trying to add herself without my consent, and the school kept it on file. Mayel sent me a short message through social media. She said Orla had told her Sutter needed familiar support and that she had not understood the situation. I believed her enough to let that part go. Lenny noticed the silence before she noticed the peace. "Grandma hasn't called," she said one night while drawing at the kitchen table. "No," I said. "Not this week." She looked worried. "Is she mad at us?" I sat beside her. "She is probably upset, but that is not the same as us doing something wrong." Lenny considered that with the serious face children use when they are building a belief they might need later. "Can people be wrong and still love you?" she asked. I looked toward the fridge where Sutter's therapy schedule hung under a magnet. "Yes," I said. "But love does not mean they get to hurt you without changing." Lenny nodded and went back to drawing. That child had lived through more adult behavior than she deserved, but she was still drawing bridges. I took that as a good sign. 3 weeks after the meeting, Orla sent a letter. Not a text, not a call. A letter in a plain envelope dropped in our mailbox. Her handwriting was sharp and elegant. "Kerris, I was wrong to cross out your name. I was wrong to act as if my fear gave me authority over your marriage or your child. I believed I was holding the family together, but I was holding too tightly to the wrong things. I do not know how to repair this. I would like to try, if you allow it." I read it twice. There was no full confession of every wound, no perfect apology, no magic transformation. But there was one sentence that mattered. "I was wrong to cross out your name." I showed it to Paren because legal boundaries still mattered. Then I waited 3 days before answering because forgiveness offered too quickly can become another way to avoid the truth. Finally, I wrote, "We can start with coffee. Just you and me. No business, no Lenny, no decisions. Conversation first." We met at a small cafe near Canal Park on a windy Thursday morning. Orla looked older without an audience. She wore a gray coat and no pearls. For the first few minutes, we talked about safe things. The lake, Sutter's therapy, Lenny's school art show. Then Orla folded her napkin and said, "When Sutter got hurt, I felt like I was losing him to a room I could not enter. Doctors, forms, your name on everything. I hated that I had to ask you for access to my own son." I stirred my coffee, even though I had already mixed in the cream. "You did not have to hate me for being the person he chose." She swallowed. "I know that now." I looked at her. "Do you, or do you only know that Gannon lied?" It was a hard question. Her eyes filled, but she did not look away. "Both," she said. "I know both." That was the first real step. Not enough to rebuild a family, but enough to stop pretending there had never been a fire. Sutter came home part-time in late spring. At first it was weekends only, with therapy equipment, medication schedules, and a list of safety instructions taped inside the kitchen cabinet. He moved slower. His speech was still uneven. Some words came easily. Others disappeared when he reached for them. But he was home. Lenny made a welcome sign that covered half the living room wall. She drew the aerial lift bridge in the background, and all 3 of us standing under it. In her drawing, Sutter held a cane. I held a folder. She held both our hands. In the corner, she drew Orla small, standing near the edge of the bridge. Not erased, not centered, just placed where she belonged for now. Children understand boundaries better than adults sometimes. They draw people exactly as close as safety allows. Our first family dinner after everything was not at Orla's house and not at the supper club. It was at our kitchen table. I made chili. Selby brought cornbread and asked before she hugged Lenny. Orla brought a pie and asked before she entered Sutter's room. Those small questions mattered. People who have never been overruled do not always understand the gift of being asked. Gannon was not invited. That was not revenge. That was reality. Trust is not restored by blood. It is restored by behavior, repeated over time. Sutter sat at the table for 20 minutes before he got tired. When Orla started to fuss, he lifted one hand. "Kerris," he said. "Just my name." But Orla understood. She stepped back. I helped him to the recliner. Later, when I came back to clear dishes, Orla was standing by the sink, crying silently into a dish towel. I let her have her tears without making them my responsibility. Months later, people asked me how I stayed so calm. That question always made me want to laugh a little. I was not calm, I was furious, I was hurt. I was scared my daughter would learn that love meant accepting erasure. I was scared my husband would recover enough to know what happened and blame himself. I was scared that if I fought too hard, people would call me unstable, and if I stayed too quiet, they would take more. Calm was not my feeling. Calm was my strategy. Documentation was my language. Boundaries were my answer. Proof was the bridge between what I knew and what they could no longer deny. I still have the red line family list. It sits in a folder with the false agreement, the notary printout, and the first copy of Orla's apology. I do not keep it because I want to stay angry. I keep it because some papers remind you of who tried to shrink you and other papers remind you that they failed. Sutter's voice memo is saved in 3 places. Sometimes, when he is frustrated during speech therapy, I play him the last line. If I can't speak, you speak for me. He always closes his eyes when he hears it, then he taps twice. I tap back. We are still building our way home. Not quickly, not perfectly, but honestly. Family is not a red line on a printed list. It is not a last name, a business sign, a supper club table, or a person who calls control protection. Family is the person who knows your voice when your mouth cannot carry it. Family is the person who keeps your child safe when everyone else is fighting over belonging. Family is the person who walks into the room with proof, not to destroy everyone, but to stop them from destroying what is true. That is my story. My mother-in-law tried to remove me from the family. 1 week later, I walked in with proof, not because I wanted war, but because my husband trusted me, my daughter needed me, and my name was never theirs to cross out. If this story reminded you that boundaries are not disrespect, they are protection, leave a comment below. And if someone you know is being pushed out, talked over, or erased by people who call it love, share this with them. Sometimes the truth does not need to shout. Sometimes it only needs the right paper, the right record, and one steady voice saying, no more. This story is inspired by real-life situations, family conflicts, relationship problems, in-law issues, and personal experiences that people often share on Reddit and other public online platforms. We take general ideas from such real-life problems only for inspiration, but this script/story is our own original writing and creative work. We do not copy anyone's personal story directly. All names, characters, locations, timelines, businesses, family details, legal details, and personal situations have been changed, fictionalized, or recreated for privacy and storytelling purposes. Any similarity to real people, families, companies, or events is purely coincidental. This video uses AI-generated voiceover and AI-generated photos/visuals/videos. The script writing, story development, commentary, explanation, editing, final review, video creation, and uploading are done manually by us. This is not an automation channel. This story is for entertainment, commentary, discussion, and meaningful reflection only. It is not legal advice, family advice, or professional advice. Copyright notice. This script, story, commentary, and video content are original creative work created by us. Please do not copy, reuse, re-upload, translate, or reproduce our story, script, video without permission. Unauthorized use may result in copyright action or copyright claim. The end.